In the spirit of reconciliation, Conscious Conversations acknowledges the traditional custodians of countries throughout Australia and their connections to the land, the sea and the communities. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. A big hello to you guys from us, firstly. The team behind Conscious Conversations. I'm Ash. Up on your screen, you'll also see Tamzeen and Marissa. And it's our mission as Conscious Conversations to ignite real and honest connection to inspire purpose-driven lives. And with this community, we are on our way to reach a goal of sparking 5 million real and honest conversations within the next 5 years. To our virtual and our real life events and workshops all across the world. So just being here that you are really contributing to that impact. And as always, we will be donating a percentage of our proceeds to a very deserving cause. So for tonight, for you guys being here, that will be to Yalari organisation, a not-for-profit who offers education scholarships to Indigenous children. So we are super, super excited to be here. And in a moment, I'll introduce our 4 incredible panelists who we are just so thrilled as a community to invite in to speak with us tonight. And I guess really comforted to in the willingness of everyone just to show up and to work towards igniting that sense of change, which we know it's just so important, these conversations to be having always, but now more so than ever. And as we dive into this really real and honest topic, which maybe isn't always the easiest conversation to have, but is so, so important as we strive to move towards making some changes for the better. And what about to do that then in community like this? So before we kick off and get right into the questions, I think, you know, it's not new news to anyone that we're in the midst of an incredibly challenging time, regardless of where we are, locally, globally, etc. And I guess before we get right into the topic, what we thought it would be a really beautiful thing is just to start with a quick check-in to our 4 panelists and just ask 2 simple things. So how are you actually doing right now? And what have you been struggling with? And so perhaps we'll start off with Lisa.
Oh, lucky me. Well, I'm here in Brisbane in Queensland, and so I'm a little bit fortunate in some ways, because it's not like Melbourne where I used to live, but in so many ways I've been in isolation for the last 15 years since I acquired multiple disabilities. I'll talk about that later, but this whole lockdown isolation thing is not new to me. And I was speaking to some of the other panelists just before we started, and I was spoken to other members of the disability community who are like, kind of normal. There's some horrible stuff going on, no doubt about that. But for so many of us, and I've written about this as well, isolation, even for new mums, is kind of something that a lot of us are a bit used to. But I'm struggling. When there was no gym, I was miserable. I'm okay now.
Thank you for sharing. And Lizzie, how have you been going?
First of all, thank you, team at Conscious Conversations. I feel delighted to be part of this conversation. The thing that I've been struggling with lately, I'm sorry to share with the whole group, but I've recently lost my cousin, and yeah, for the first time in my life, having to deal with the grief alone. It's not really something that I'm capable. I'm finding it really difficult, I guess, to firstly accept the fact, but also to grieve really in a way that I feel I'm grieving, because at the moment I feel like I'm holding it in and just not really knowing how to express that being alone and in the lockdown. So yeah, it's a new experience. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I'm so sorry for your loss. And I think, you know, that you raise a really incredible point there, in that so often, you know, when things are challenging or when they're struggling for us, who we rely on is that support network or that community around us, which is the very thing that's at the moment for many of us has been stripped away, which,
Yeah.
you know, adds a whole other level of complexity. So, yeah, it's definitely, we're really navigating new frontiers at the moment. But yeah, our thoughts are with you and your family.
Thanks.
And Kathy, how have you been traveling?
Yeah, well, thanks so much, guys, for having me. And sorry for your loss as well, Lizzie. Much love to you and your family. Well, COVID has been really challenging for all of us. I'm in Sydney, so it's I think I try to see the opportunities in everything. I mean, yes, it is hard, but what I've done recently is I thought, okay, stop whining, bitching, whining, like just you know, trying to find some I don't know, something to do. So I've recently relearned how to ride a bike. So I think that's just been something that's quite nice. I was just like, wow, why didn't I do this? I haven't ridden a bike for like 25 years. So it's just like I was suddenly so nostalgic, and I just kind of reconnected with moments in my childhood. So I thought that was really nice. So yeah, I mean, yes, it's been hard, but you know, I try to do things like little things like that kind of spark joy, if I was to channel Marie Kondo. And I've also done a lot of weeding in my garden because I haven't touched it. So it's just like, oh my God, this is quite fun. I'm getting all these weeds out, and I'm kind of like putting it in a pile just to see like how big it'll be. But yeah, that's me. Thank you.
It's incredible the things that we rediscover, right? You know, when we actually are given that time and that space, which we always have, but we just fill it up with everything else, right?
That's right. We're kind of obsessed with being busy, but I mean, I actually find weeding really mindful. Like, could you imagine that? The next mindful thing is weeding your garden.
You heard it here first. No, there you go. Watch the space. Thank you. And Lillian, how have you been doing? You're based here in Victoria, right?
Yes, I'm in Victoria. Lizzie, I'm sending you love, and I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry that your family has to also go through this. I'm in Victoria, and we're in stage 4, which is, it's just driving me absolutely crazy. My biggest frustration is not knowing when this is going to end, and there's so many rumors on the stage 4 restrictions being extended even further. So just the thought about that is just absolutely frustrating. But the flip side, like Kathy said, there are opportunities in this season. For me, I've been forced to really challenge my adaptability skills. I thought I'd nailed it, but I mean, COVID-19 has reminded me that, hey, you have not nailed it. You've got a long way to go. And that has meant moving my business to an online service model delivery, and whether it's my keynotes or my workshops or consulting. But with that, I've been able to share beautiful moments with my family. Most of my work usually involves face-to-face interaction, but given that everything is done virtually, I've been able to share moments with my family. And I remember the first virtual keynote that I did with on behalf of Future Crunch, who I work with. My mom popped up. She's actually locked in, and she's just put up a comment there. My mom from Kenya had logged in with my friend and her friends. So I'm trying to be professional to deliver this keynote. Mom's name come up, Grace Kikuvi, and all my aunties, and they were cheering me on from the virtual sidelines, and it was just such an amazing time. So that's one of the things that I really value about having this virtual space. It's not only reaching a wider audience, but it's also getting to share this moment with you far away. So welcome, Mom, and welcome everyone else.
Oh, welcome, Mom. I love that, and I can totally resonate. I also teach yoga and as part of my work, and my mom has actually been joining for the very first time all the way from Ireland weekly. So it's been incredible to be able to, you know, share that aspect of you as well, you know, with the people you love. So yeah, there, you know, there are absolutely pockets of gold from this time too. So it's just, I guess, you know, as Kathy so beautifully said, you know, that element of perspective and, you know, how do we maybe reframe things, but also acknowledge that what we're going through is incredibly difficult. And, you know, but I guess the beautiful thing is we're all in this together at the moment. You know, we're all going through it all. So thank you for sharing. And, you know, we got a bit of an insight into each of you there, but what I'd love to do now is really dive a little bit deeper. I know that each of you have very unique, incredible stories to share. So I'd love to firstly share a little bit about you guys and then have you talk to our community here about your stories and your own journey to how you got here. And I thought maybe Lillian will start with you. So Lillian is a diversity and inclusion evangelist, obsessed with helping individuals and organizations harness their extraordinary power. Lillian is a Kenyan Australian who uses this incredible African tribal framework to supercharge the gifts of diversity and inclusion in both people and businesses. Her purpose is to create meaningful change so that all of humanity can be equal beneficiaries of equity, inclusion, and harmony. Pretty impressive few words there to speak about you and all the incredible work that you do. But we'd love to, if you could, please share your story of how you made it from, you know, your birthplace in Kenya all the way to Australia, and how that you did go on to make it your life's mission to create change on such an important topic.
So I was born in Nairobi, which is a capital city of Kenya, and I was raised in Mombasa, which is a coastal city. So if you think about Cairns, Mombasa is like Cairns, very tropical, very warm, and just beautiful, a beautiful place. And I'm not biased, it's actually that beautiful. And I grew up with 3 younger siblings and my mom and dad. So I've got 2 younger brothers, Leonard, Moses, and my sister, the youngest, sorry. Her name is Mbeyu. And my nuclear family is just really special. We're a very close-knitted family. My nuclear family is also part of a paternal family that is polygamous, thanks to my grandfather who chose to marry 3 consenting women at the same time. So some people look at him as crazy. And I mean, the first time I came to Australia, it was considered a novelty. And to me, it was my normality, having 3 grandmothers and spending Christmases together and family functions and lots of cousins, lots of kids, uncles and aunties. And that was my upbringing. My maternal side of the family, my grandparents chose to be monogamous, but we're still very much part of a very big family. And what I loved about being part of this large community was having confidence, having friends, having teachers that I could easily access. And it was really easy because I had the relationship capital already, being related to them. And one of the great things that my family did for me was serve as incubators for my purpose, incubators for the work that I do. One of the philosophies that guides us, one of the tribal philosophies that guides us is something called Harambe, which is a word from my native language, Swahili, that means pulling together and making your way towards a common goal. So that collectivist mindset is something that I was raised by and something that really shaped my upbringing. At the same time, I also got to see in that safe environment of being in a large family, I got to see how my family used adversity. I got to see how they used their privilege to help others. And what that looked like for me in a day-to-day kind of setting was we always had people in our home. We always opened our home to people. So we always had people coming in and out, and that was very normal. Children were encouraged to be very proactive in supporting the community and providing for the community. I saw my parents educate children to give them an opportunity to create a life for themselves and build a career. So that was very, very, very normal for me growing up. And another thing that they also helped me with is nurture my fire for social justice. They allowed me to express who I was. And I actually discovered recently that they had a secret name for me, the human rights activist of the family, because I was very, very vocal about injustice, especially social economic injustice. And I would always speak my mind. And my approach was not exactly graceful, had very abrasive tactics, and that used to get me in trouble a lot. But what my family taught me was influence, how to use influence to affect change, how to use influence to create awareness. And being also part of a collectivist culture where communication is really important, I got to learn that from my family. Another gift that I received from being part of the community that I come from is my parents come from 2 different tribes, which is very normal. Intertribal marriage is very normal in Kenya. We have 43 tribes in Kenya, and basically a tribe represents a community of people that share the same values, beliefs, and culture. We have the same ancestral lineage. And being a member of the tribe is a very special thing. It gives you a strong sense of identity. It gives you a relationship capital and allows you to connect with other people who are like you, that are outside of your family. It also gives you that cross-cultural capability. So belonging to one tribe and also coexisting with other tribes allowed me to understand how other cultures, other tribes operated, because we're very different. We're very different from each other. So as a young girl, I had to learn how to understand the nuances of each tribe, my father's tribe, the dialect that was spoken, that is actually still spoken. And I'm not very good at speaking my father's dialect at all. He didn't even have the patience to teach me. And there were many times where I had cousins translating my communication with grandparents who could not speak the national languages, Swahili and English. Luckily, my mom comes from a tribe where her dialect happens to be a national language, Swahili. So that was something that was easy for me. But there was things that I had to understand, things like customary law, how marriage occurs in both cultures, succession. What happens when people die? How do you celebrate that? What practices around that? Gender roles, traditional roles. What's the role of a woman in 2 tribes? How is a woman seen in both tribes? So as a young girl, I had to understand, what does this mean for me to not only appreciate the diversity of cultures, but also what does this mean to be effective in each tribe and across both tribes, and also across other tribes that I coexisted with. Now, the great thing about my upbringing was there was never a dull moment. My parents were both professionals. So that meant their jobs placed them in the urban cities. So I grew up in the urban cities with my siblings. And we had a very modern kind of lifestyle. And my parents were pretty blessed with the careers that they had while I was growing up. So they did pretty well for themselves, were very comfortable. So we had the privilege, we were afforded some privileges as a young girl. And I received formal education. My modern upbringing was really heavily influenced by the British who colonized Kenya. They occupied Kenya in the 1800s until 1963, when Kenya gained its independence. So there's actually a lot of British influences, external influences that shaped my modern upbringing. But at the same time, the tribal influence was really important. It was embedded in our DNA. When I was, let's say, I would be in school, we spoke Swahili sometimes, but English was widely spoken. When I was at home, I was expected to play gender roles, and whilst living in the city. So I understood what it was like to uphold my cultural heritage whilst being in a society where I had external influences that were very different from me. When I finished my high school, my parents offered me the opportunity to pursue my university studies in Australia. And that was a very generous offer. And of course, it was a no-brainer for me. I just said, yep, not a problem. I'm going to go to Australia. I picked the University of Wollongong because we had some local agents that were great salespeople. And I signed up, and I didn't know anyone. I'd never been overseas. And I said goodbye to my whole family, and I'd never even, I only knew one person in Australia. And I felt confident. I felt very equipped for the trip because I had the tribal teachings, I had my family love, I had all these amazing experiences growing up. So the first 20 years, I felt like I had enough knowledge and experience to serve me in Australia. And I also wanted to gain independence from my family. I wanted, a typical 20-year-old wanting their own independence. And I remember getting off the plane in Sydney in 1999. And I say this in in my keynotes and workshops. It's the very first time that I realized that I was Black. I had never, ever, ever thought about the color of my skin. I'd never had to, because I was part of the majority group. Everywhere that I looked around in Kenya, people looked like me. So I never had to think about my external appearance. You know that feeling when you step outside your normal environment, and then all of a sudden you're a standout. That is exactly what I felt in that moment. So I spent my first 5-6 years completing my uni education in psychology, and I did my bachelor's and my postgraduate diploma at the University of Wollongong, and I also got my postgraduate diploma in Australian College of Applied Psychology. And those subjects were chosen with intention because of my love for people, my love for social justice, and it just felt like a natural fit for me to pursue that line of study. I love the experience of being different. There was one part that was really positive. Being different, it gave me the opportunity to explore this new culture. And for people that were open-minded, people that were quite diverse, welcomed me and made me feel like I belonged. So that gave me opportunities to learn. That built my cross-cultural intelligence. That exposed me to all these amazing food that I'd never tasted before, and really gave me a more sophisticated palate. That challenged some of my views as well, growing up. Some attitudes that I grew up with, for example, the role of a woman, coming from a very patriarchal society. So those are some of the beautiful gifts that I got from being part of this multicultural society. And that's been the case throughout in the last 22 years. The dark side for me has been experiencing racial discrimination, and something that I've not been prepared for. Racial discrimination was something that I learned when I was in Kenya from my family. I learned about the British colonial rule and the oppression, and I learned how that oppressed my family members and how they missed out on opportunities because of that. I learned about the apartheid system in South Africa and the racial segregation for any non-white citizens. I learned about slavery in the US. So my understanding about racial discrimination was on an intellectual level, and also a little bit far removed from what my forefathers had gone through. And then I had to experience it. And the experience for me was, felt like it was a very surreal moment. I was ill-prepared, and going through systems, processes, structures that constantly remind you that you do not belong was something that I was not ready for. And my journey in Australia has been about discovery. It's been about how do I use this information to help others understand lived experience of people like me, and to also show them how to maximize or capitalize on the benefits of diversity and inclusion. And that's why I do what I do, because I have been through some significant challenges. I've encountered lots of barriers. I have observed around me people like me and even other marginalized groups as well experience significant injustice. And with that fire, that young Lillian from Kenya, that fire, I feel like that fire has been flamed. And that's why I do what I do now. So what I've been doing, the work that I've been doing for the last 13 months full time, speaking, consulting, running workshops, and also coaching. And I've had the opportunity to work with organizations like Medibank Private, Open Universities, thanks to Kathy and the connection that she gave me through Keynote Worthy. I've worked with Parkville Correction Centre, Melton City Council, and I currently work with Future Crunch. So the work that I do is based on my lived experience. And I believe that there's a big opportunity to merge my culture and also my experience to serve others.
Yeah, beautiful. And thank you for sharing. It's incredible. And I'm reminded time and time again through conversation, when having these open dialogues, how so often each element of our experience as we grow up to become, whatever we become, it always means something. It's always there for a reason. And, you talked about combining that strength and that tribal mentality to then having that real lived and felt experience of racial injustice when you arrived here, which you'd heard about, but you hadn't necessarily experienced firsthand, which was, and how all those worlds combine together to bring you to where you are, which is, such an incredible change maker. And so, yeah, it's so interesting when you start to put all the pieces together to realize, oh, yeah, I understand. And so thank you for sharing. We would love now to pass on to Kathy, who is an editor, a writer, and a presenter who specializes in human resources and communications. And Kathy is passionate about ensuring a balanced representation, not only at work, but beyond. And she's also, as Lillian mentioned, the founder of an incredible organization called Keynote Worthy. And outside of work, which I just loved, Kathy loves to do open mics and stand-up comedy, which also might be something that might be surprise you better. Collects indoor plants, and now we've also learned loves weeding. And I'm thinking about her next project to change the world. So Kathy, what series of events, or I guess pivotal moments in your life maybe caused you to make that decision to use your voice for awareness of diversity and inclusion?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I've always, just like Lillian, had this passion for social justice when I was a little kid. So in school, you know how you've got those Amnesty International clubs and environment clubs and all that? I was like the nerd in there. So I'd be writing letters, I'd be watering the plants, I'd be doing all that stuff. So I've always wanted to use my voice for change, because so as an Asian growing up, and as a woman as well, you're pretty much expected to be quiet and only speak up if there was something really significant to say. But I was just like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I typically enjoyed things that were creative and not so much like the maths and all that kind of chess club and all that shit. I was pretty much like, so I did public speaking, I did debating in school. And even though I enjoyed it, I always felt left. I always felt like I never belonged. I always felt like I was never smart enough. And I think because I look different as well. So I was the only Asian. I was the only culturally diverse person in the teams and in the competitions. And so, so before I go into the event side, I just wanted to kind of paint the picture of how I started. So I can remember one pivotal moment. I think I was about 13 years old. I was in a public speaking competition, and the crowd was, they were all parents. And I was fortunate enough to go to a private school. My parents took out a really big loan just to get me into a good school. So I always felt this, oh my God, I really need to prove myself and I really need to do well. I don't want to disappoint my parents. So here I am in this competition, and guess what I talk about? I talk about social justice. I talk about racism. I talk about the experiences that I've had where people would just wind down their window, yell at me to go back to my country. And I'd be like, I was born here. What do you mean? So as a kid, you get really confused when people say that. It's like, well, I was born here. Like, I have the same rights. I'm same education system. The only difference is that I look different. So anyway, so just going back to that public speaking. So I was in front of, all these parents. And then in the front row, a couple of the parents made faces at me. They were like that. And as a 13-year-old, you're like, what? Why are you making faces at me? Is there something on my face? Like, is something wrong with me? And so I was really, really confused. But I think just on reflection, what they were uncomfortable with is a little Asian girl speaking up. Because we're taught, or society is taught, that little Asian girls are meant to be quiet, to be like Hello Kitty, basically, with no mouth. So, and to shut their legs, basically. Have like a chastity belt. Anyway, so that was, it planted a seed. So I got really frustrated because it's like, I have a right to use my voice for change, and I'm going to do that. So it continued on, throughout adulthood as well. And so I did a degree in HR, human resources, because I didn't want to do economics, accounting, law, be a doctor. I just wanted to help people, basically, and kind of do that kind of leadership kind of stuff. And so then I kind of ventured into writing because that was what I really loved. Like in school I participated in all these writing competitions because I wanted to win a book because my parents couldn't afford it. But I never really took it seriously until later on, because it's like that imposter syndrome and that kind of, that the self-talk that, you're not meant to be a writer, you're not meant to be a presenter because you are Asian and you don't fit that mold. So I was just like, I think in my mid-20s, I was just like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. So again, another moment was, I think this was about 2 years ago. I was reporting an event. So it was this really large conference. I get free tickets because I was working for a publication. So I get part of media, report on the events. And the event was just full of white men in steel cap boots, 6 foot tall. The speaker said in one of the segments, turn to someone who you wouldn't normally talk to. And guess what? Probably about 20 men started looking at me. And I just felt like what? I felt like a zoo animal. I felt like a meerkat or something. Like, what's going on? So it was incredibly awkward. Like, just imagine like men circling around you and you're like, what do I do? I don't want to take my clothes off. I'm joking. It was just really weird. So I felt like there was this pressure to fill the void or fill the silence. So it was just so awkward. And anyway, so after that segment, I went up to the speaker because I was just like, like furiously writing notes. I was just like, what is going on? I don't get this. Because, I mean, how many of you have been to an event or conference where you're like, what the hell is this person talking about? Like, it's all fluff, it's all jargon, but it's all like, it feels like it's all theatre. It's like a bit of Tony Robbins, a bit of like, yeah. And so anyway, I was just like, how am I going to write an article about this when I've learnt nothing? So I spoke to the speaker, this guy with a very thick American accent. And then there's just this white dude just swooped in and said, hello. And I thought he was trying to pick me up or something like that. And then like he just started questioning me about my credentials. He was asking me what makes me qualified enough to write. Why am I here? What do I do? Who do I write for? And it was just this interrogation. And I felt really much like I had to prove myself somehow to a total stranger. And then afterwards, I was just like, this would not happen if I was not Asian. If I was a typical straight female, blonde hair, blue eyed, nothing wrong, blonde hair, blue eyed, but I guess the typical, you know, or the majority. So I was just like, I got to do something. I got to do something about this. So yeah, like after going to so many different events, I was just like, I need to find a solution. Like, this is unacceptable. And then on top of that, I've seen so many conferences where it's an all male lineup. Like, we still see that today, even today during COVID, when, you know, when we're having virtual events, and you've literally got the world of talent. Like, it's not just restricted to Australia, but like, there's just so much talent to tap into. The only thing you've got to organize is the logistics and the time zone. That's it. Like, stop being lazy. But people are still going to hold onto their bias, and what they believe will service their audience. But really what it does is it disservices everyone. And so I'm a firm believer of you can't be who you can't see. And growing up, I never had any role models. The only role model I had was Lilin Chin, who's she's now retired, but she was an SBS news presenter, and she completely owned everything that she was wearing. Well, I mean, maybe she didn't own it, but you know what I mean? Like, her style, she had special wardrobe. But just basically she owned it. Like, she made no apologies for being who she was. And I aspired to be that sort of person, but I mean, through corporate life and, you know, through society, and we have to wear a mask, you know, an invisible mask, not a literal mask, but, well, in Melbourne you do. Sorry, Marcus. But look, we're all faking it because we're trying to fit in, and fitting in is completely different to belonging. And so that's what I'm trying to do with Keynote Worthy is that I want people to belong, and it doesn't have to be events in the context of an event. It could be at work, could be wherever, because I mean, for a long time I've never felt like I belonged, and I've had to resign from companies because of sexual harassment, to name a few. So that's my mission and goal in life. So that's why I've started Keynote Worthy last year, and I've already helped so many people, underrepresented people, land speaking gigs, which they otherwise wouldn't have because of our system, our broken system, where it favours, you know, the popular people, the celebrities, the people who can't even speak properly but are famous because they've been on MasterChef or whatever TV show it was. Yeah, so that's my story.
Amazing. I love that idea of you can't be who you can't see. It's so, you know, as a phrase, it's so simple, but when you think about it, it's really so true. And how often, you know, we'll talk a little bit about representation a little bit later on, but, you know, how often are you just seeing the same faces time and time again? And what happens when that face isn't one that looks like yours? And I guess nothing like that really lived and felt experience to put such a fire in your belly to then go off and use that for good. So incredible. Thank you for sharing. Now I'd love to have a bit of a chat to Lizzie. So Lizzie, another amazing individual, was just 11 years old when she and her family escaped South Sudan and forced to seek asylum as refugees. Like many, Lizzie was met with a pretty challenging time when she arrived in 2005, and between not knowing the language and then that sense of feeling isolated, which, you know, we've heard things of from our other speakers already. But to fast forward 15 years, not only has Lizzie received the Empowering Monash Women Award, she's a member of the Community Ambassador City of Monash. She's a Refugee Week Ambassador, and she's also been selected as a member of the Metropolitan Partnership's Inner Southeast Region Board. She's also, to add to her incredible list of qualities, is she's just recently joined the LXRP as an Industry Inclusion and Capability Officer. So Lizzie, we are also honoured to have you here today, and I guess having listened now to both Lillian and Kathy's stories, we'd love to hear more about your own journey and from a place of that, you know, isolation from not even knowing the language to how you get to become an Industry Inclusion and Capability Officer, and as well as winning or being a recipient, should I say, of the Empowering Monash Women Awards. That is a mouthful in itself to say, let alone to become a recipient of. So yes, we'd love to hear more about you.
Thanks, Az. Am I saying your name correctly? Az or Ash?
And Ash, yes.
Ash, sorry. Yeah, Ash.
All good.
Yeah. Okay, so where do I begin? Well, unlike Kathy and Lillian, I didn't have any fire for justice or anything like that. In fact, I mostly just wanted to, I was curious as to why ants were doing what they did on daily, just sort of just walking back and forth. I didn't understand that, and I was curious. So as a child, I spent a lot of my time, just really, just in the wilderness. You know, I was born in Sudan, didn't really know much about the rest of the world, and didn't in fact know about the civil war that was going on in our backyard. So obviously I was a naive child, and just really was preoccupied with the simple things in nature, and I absolutely adored animals. Fast forward age 5, I lose my mom. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but that event changed the course of my life. Ended up under my grandmother's care, so that's her mom. Absolutely wonderful woman. She's actually my role model. At the age of 11, as you mentioned earlier, we had to escape South Sudan to Egypt. I've lived in Egypt for, I think, maybe between 3 to 4 years, but it felt like ages, because for the first time, like Lillian mentioned, I realized that my skin color was, for others, a sign of, I felt like I was met with disgust. Like, people were very much negative towards me, and not because of my being, but rather because of how I look. Right? So that was a new experience for me, being a young person at the age of 11, experiencing harassment and, you know, physical assault, just for the fact that, you know, you don't have the same color as them. So for me, that was weird. It didn't make any sense to me, and I didn't really want it to make sense, because I didn't think such behavior should make any sense. Anyhow, so I didn't like Egypt much. But we were there because we had to be there for the whole process to be, you know, refugee, and then being accepted into another country. So basically, it was more like, you know, I did what the family asked. I didn't have any say in everything that was decided. If it was up to me, I would have gone back to Sudan. I missed my friends, and being in Egypt was felt like hell. But that's, you know, personal experience. And then, you know, fast forward age 13. Thankfully, we were granted a visa, and, you know, for us, I guess, because we were with our grandmother, meant that we didn't have to wait long. For most refugees, you know, they wait years and years before being replaced, or being sort of, I don't know what they call it, being accepted into some other country. But for us, yeah, so I never heard of Australia, only heard of America, and so it was kind of, I didn't really have any views about what Australia would look like. So I wasn't particularly concerned. I just, that moment, the moment we stepped we got off the plane, that was the moment I suddenly became the responsible person in the family. I remember my grandmother looking at me and telling me to direct them, you know, her and my siblings, to direct them out of the airport. And obviously I didn't speak English. There was no writing in Arabic, and yeah, and there weren't many people that looked like me, so it was a really strange situation. But somehow I made it out. I didn't think it was going to be a great life spent at an airport, so I did my best to get out of there. Just following the crowd, really. Just got lucky. Oh yeah, and fast forward 2 years after staying in Australia, you know, I'm in high school. I'm learning English. You know, I'm enjoying meeting friends from different backgrounds. I absolutely love, you know, meeting new people. And I remember, must have been 17. You know, me and my friends literally bought. We went and bought some sweets before heading out to to play basketball. And as we were walking away from the cashier, we just paid, for, and we were called back. And I'm confused because at this stage I'm thinking, what is going on? You know, my heart sort of dropped because, we were, the person that approached us was very aggressive and said, you're not going anywhere. We're calling the cops. I'm looking at these girls. I'm thinking, did any of you take anything? Because I do not want to be in this situation. I didn't say anything, obviously, because I was just terrified. And literally 2 minutes later, 2 cops walked in, and we were asked to go to the back room. At that point, I'm just like dead inside because I'm like, oh my God, my grandmother's going to be disappointed. I do not want to end up in jail. It was just horrible experience. And nothing was said. So the cops went in some dark room and came back and just asked us to leave. So that experience really stayed with me because when I think back, I'm thinking, what was that about? What did we do wrong? We literally paid and we were walking out just like everybody else, except the person saw us, 3 Black girls, they must have saw something, and so I've always, I've often felt like, some spaces are you get the feeling that you're not welcome. But instead of being asked to leave, a really horrible situation is created. You suddenly find yourself in a way, like you feel you're scared. You feel terrified, you feel worried, you feel all sorts of horrible feelings, and you have done absolutely nothing. So I've had those experiences growing up in Australia, and I know other young people have had similar experiences. So racism is real, as much as people would like to not admit it. The reality is it is real and it stays with you. Like, I'm now 29 and I still remember that experience. And I also remember the feeling, how it made me feel. And I can't imagine what it's like, for other young people. I fortunately, I was raised by a very strong woman who really instilled in me the grace to be strong in everything, and to also really to be very patient, to not jump to conclusion. But those are values that was instilled in me. But for some other young people, they might not have similar coping mechanism. I've seen a lot of young people getting into unfortunately horrible addictions, because the feeling when you feel you don't belong, it creates other issues. You're suddenly not, you're not going for that opportunity because it is not given to you. You find yourself stuck, and I'm very lucky because I've in some way I've made a life for myself, but it hasn't been easy, and I don't want it to be for myself. And I think, I really was excited to come and share my experiences here because I believe that, through sharing our stories, but also through connecting with other people, change is possible, because we do need to recognize how diversity is not just about feeling good about how eating a variety of food is great, but it's also about accepting people, but really meaning it, you know, where people don't feel subject to discrimination or assault or all sorts of horrible things just because they don't look like you. I don't think that's good enough. But you know, yeah, look, that's yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's been incredible to listen to, you know, your openness and your honesty about your lived experiences, you know, which are particularly, and I guess for all of you who've spoken so far, which are, you know, they're not rainbows and fairies, you know, it's telling real life things that have happened. And you know, you said that one particular experience happened to you when you were 19, and it sticks with you like it was yesterday. You know, if you close your eyes, I'm sure you could still feel exactly how you felt at that moment. And so thank you for sharing. And diversity and inclusion, absolutely topics we want to dive in further to, which I know the remainder of our community are also very keen to talk to. So we will dive into that in just a bit. But for now, last but not least, also want to extend a warm welcome to Lisa. Lisa is an award-winning writer, author, presenter, female change maker, motivator, and mentor who is passionate about creating visibility for disability and changing the way that disability is represented in mainstream culture. Lisa is a vocal advocate who is actively creating real change by collaborating with peak bodies, groups, and individuals who share her vision. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
And having, you know, we've spoken in the past, and having listened to your story, there has definitely been one pivotal moment that I know sticks out that was completely life-changing for you. And we'd love you to share your personal journey to how you then, from that moment, went on to become such an advocate.
Sure. Well, since I have a few minutes, I'll just give some context and give you some background. So I grew up here in Brisbane and went to school, went to university, and like a lot of the other panelists, had an interest in social justice, debating, things like that. So did business communications and media, 2 degrees at uni, then moved to Melbourne, worked in advertising agencies for national and international brands, loved my job as a copywriter, absolutely loved it. Apart from the brands, the big brands, I secretly loved all of the charities that we worked for on the side, maybe pro bono jobs and things like that. That was my secret passion, because I knew the power and influence of media, as many of you would, to shape values and change public perceptions. And I knew that by doing work for the charity, I could essentially achieve that. But the big thing happened to me when I was 24, just at Melbourne Airport one morning, and by this time I'd been promoted, won awards, living life like any 24-year-old, loving it. But then I had a brain hemorrhage, like a stroke, and just at the airport one morning, I have no recollection of that, and went into a coma for 3 weeks. I was on life support for 2 months and in hospital for over a year after that. So that was an interesting year. My family were told they may have to turn off my life support at one stage. When I say my family, my immediate family, mum, dad, my sister, and my brother. I was in Melbourne. They flew straight down from Brisbane and just slept on the floor of the hospital in one of the wards for 2 months, basically, until they could move me back to Brisbane, because they knew I had to have so many operations. I would be in there for such an extended period. It just wasn't, it made no sense to keep me in Melbourne and have my family sleeping on the floor for a year. So during that first year in hospital, my left leg, all of my right toes, and 9 of my fingertips were amputated, chopped off. And I had heart surgery twice and total hip replacement. So I'm got the body of a 90-year-old woman now, I think, with my fake hip and my arthritis and everything. And then there are the things you can see. So these days I get around in a wheelchair. I have a prosthetic leg, and I know you can only see my head. I'm one of those blonde people you were talking about. You can only see my head on the screen, but the rest of me is covered in scars and metal pieces and everything. So even though I resonated a lot with what the other panelists were saying about being the one who looks different in the room, and just by taking a look at my shot on the from what you can all see, the little thumbnail on the screen, you might have thought, what on earth is she talking about? She's a blonde-haired, blue-eyed blonde girl who has nothing. Why on earth would she relate to any of that? But I've been to business conferences where 800 were in the room and I'm the only one there with a physical disability. So I found a way to essentially combine my background, my professional background in media and advertising, with my lived experience with disability. So a lot of that has been around creating visibility for disability, because I spent so many years creating visibility for my brands, my clients, their brands, their products, their messages. And I realized that so many of those same principles and strategies could easily be applied to something far more important than European cars and baby food. It could be applied to disability or other areas that that needed that spotlight. So I'm working with a fantastic group here in Australia. They're based down in Sydney, called Media Diversity Australia. And you might have seen on the news, only on Monday they released a report into the fact that our television screens are completely whitewashed. I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, but a really, really small percentage of presenters and journalists on mainstream media were of culturally diverse backgrounds. So that's one group I've been working with, and obviously my area is more in disability and cultural diversity. I think one thing I meant to say before is that you can see all of my wheelchair, my scars, my missing pieces, but it's not the physical disabilities that impact my day and challenge me the most. It's all of the invisible disabilities that are up here that you can't see. So I have a permanent brain injury, and it's not an intellectual disability, but it just means that things like my speech are affected. I wasn't drinking before tonight, and this is just my voice normally, and I will forget things all the time. So I meant to tell this story about 5 minutes ago, but forgot. So that's why I'm out of order. And my eyesight, I'm over 25% blind. I have epilepsy, so I can't drive. I have a magnificent husband who helps me get around from time to time. But I suppose there's two sides to my story and me and what I do. I can't really tell one without the other. To give you some context, there's my personal lived experience about how I came to be passionate about disability. I'd always considered myself an ally. I grew up around kids with disabilities, went to a school with kids with disabilities, and was always an ally. But to be a really passionate advocate, in my opinion, it's a whole different ball game to have that real lived experience. So there's lots of other bits and pieces, but yeah, collaborating with brands, as you mentioned before, who share my vision around creating this visibility for disability and creating diversity and inclusion, because I've done a few interviews recently where I've referred to the fact that disability is a far less palatable form of diversity. Really, really unfortunate, but that's been my experience across the board with many others as well. That I've been in the room as the person to tick the diversity box. No doubt some of you have as been as well, and it's really, really uncomfortable. So trying to build that awareness and educate, because I spent the first 24 years of my life without a disability, and in some ways I have that really strong before and after experience that maybe a lot of other advocates don't necessarily have, and that in some ways has been beneficial, because like I said, so I'm not just making it up, it's not in my head. I know for a fact that this is what happened when I was 24, and this is how it happened when I did exactly the same thing from a wheelchair. And the best example would be employment. So in advertising, you go around, you show your resume, you show your portfolio of your work, and that's what I did for years, and I'd often get a job. And then when I went to re-enter the workforce, I did exactly the same thing, same resume, same credentials, same degrees, same portfolio, same standard of work, only I was sitting in a wheelchair this time with a funny voice. And it was a very, very different experience, and some very, very patronising, oh, good on you, this really lowered expectation of disability. People were just absolutely shocked that I could, or anyone would possibly want to enter the media and advertising world with disability, because as many of you are already aware, it's a very narrow stereotype that definitely doesn't include people who look different. So yeah, when you've got all the metal that I do, they looked at me like I had two heads. So that's a whole jumbled mess of my stories, but there's plenty more to tell along the way.
Amazing, thank you for sharing. And it's been so interesting, even just watching other people's reactions as you're speaking, and that, you know, even you mentioned there that patronising voice, and I just saw everyone's head just nod, you know, and that felt sense of, you know, regardless of your experience, how perhaps that you've met that. And I think you also touched on some incredible themes there, especially now, which we'd love to dive into with all of you guys, is that difference between diversity and inclusion. And, you know, you mentioned yourself, even in terms of being the person in the room to tick the box, and how maybe necessarily they don't go hand in hand. And so I'd love you, you know, maybe you'd like to start, or you can jump out to one of you other guys. In terms of diversity and inclusion as a topic, I know, and having spoken to you all individually as well, that there really seems to be a lot of confusion about the two. And so I'd love to I guess, chat briefly around why do we need to consider both, and what's one maybe without the other, or where have we been getting it wrong? Whoever'd like to jump in, don't all jump at once.
I would like to explain what the difference between diversity and inclusion is with a metaphor. So just think of it as a fruit salad. You've got your orange, you've got your mango, you've got your peach, but what binds them together is the dressing. So the dressing is pretty much the inclusion bit that makes it all work together. So diversity is about, you know, everyone is different in some way, shape or form. So that's how I would explain it, the difference in terminology. What I would also like to add is that it's a trending topic for the wrong reasons. And with the whole Black Lives movement and everything, you know, even for my own business, there are people that have reached out wanting to collaborate, but they are collaborating for the wrong reasons. They just want that, basically that halo effect to say, hey, I'm all about diversity and inclusion, but they actually don't really know what it means. They're not a genuine ally. They just want to tap into my network and make themselves look good just to protect their own ego. And that pisses me off. It does piss me off. Yeah, I just wanted to add that it is unfortunately trending. Like, while sorry to sound really, you know, like a Debbie Downer or whatever, but I mean, it's so important, but don't don't poo-poo the movement, you know, just because of your ego. So that's the frustration that I face in working in this field, because you know, for me and genuine allies, we want to create change, but there are other people there that are just not genuine about it. So if they really believed in the Black Lives Matter movement or actually eradicating racism, then be an anti-racist and fix your boards. You know, if your boards are all homogenous and all the same, do something about it. So there's one thing about saying something, but there's that other, you know, action component, which is missing.
Yeah, we're seeing about a lot of that in media, and that's one thing that Media Diversity Australia uncovered, was that they may have the you know, the tokenistic presenter of colour there to tick the diversity box and make them look like good corporate citizens, and oh, look at us, we've got an Indigenous woman presenting the news, but then their board is full of white men, for example.
Yeah.
Networks.
Yeah, and that's with SBS at the moment. The whole board is all white. The leadership teams are all white. So I almost feel like you're exploiting people. You're using diversity to your advantage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And such a powerful thing when, you know, SBS being such a huge media outlet is what we look to for representation. And if, you know, the board who sits behind all of that isn't giving that and, you know, speaking from the top down, then what chance have we got?
Mm-hmm. I think the point, I feel like diversity and inclusion has been complicated. We have overcomplicated it. It literally comes down to humanity. It literally comes down to humanity, who you are as a person, who you are with all the wonderful things that intersect and make you as a person. And that's that concept of intersectionality that's been coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who's a feminist activist from America, talks about intersectionality and how we're approaching diversity and inclusion is it's in a singular way, where we focus on gender, we focus on accessibility, we focus on cultural diversity, but we fail to look at the whole being. That's a missing piece, and I think it's actually quite insulting for any of us to be singled out to one thing, whatever is visible to others, when you're made up of a lot more. There's so much stuff that's invisible. Your thinking patterns, your beliefs, your values, your gender is one part, your professional background is one part. All of those things, all of those elements intersect to create who you are. And that's where your uniqueness comes in. And I feel the biggest issue is looking at it from a singular point of view and then coming up with inclusion strategies if you're committed enough. I've seen organizations who just think, we're going to solve the diversity problem by hiring a whole heap of women and tick. But they haven't thought about, what about the inclusion infrastructure? What's going to be the experience of these women when they go into that organization? There's a failure to look at inclusion and at the same time as diversity. And I saw this quote that I really like from Diversity Australia. It says, if inclusion is your strategy, then diversity is your outcome. So if you look at the gaps where there's a lack of diversity, then that is the issue. There's been no focus on inclusion. And the reason I also say we've overcomplicated this is because people forget that they're also a participant of the community. They also want to feel like they belong. They go into a workplace, and if somebody else is having a terrible experience and whinging and whining about it, their experience is affected. And you might be the most privileged, but that's affecting you. So how can you be part of that change? Or how can you use your privilege when all those intersecting factors interact? Because with intersectionality, this theory, they talk about you can have dimensions that interact that can give you privilege and also cause discrimination at the same time, depending on the context. So as a Black woman in corporate Australia, there's a disadvantage that comes with those two factors intersecting, because the gender factor and the cultural diversity factor. And research has actually shown that that creates a glass cultural ceiling. So I can go up until here to a particular point in an organization. And I've seen that in my 15 years in the corporate sector. I always knew that I had a limit because that cultural ceiling limited my mobility to get into leadership, limited my mobility to secure roles that would actually really make a difference and represent voices like mine. So I feel like there's a massive missed opportunity for organizations to simplify this whole journey and say it's singular and then just take a lazy approach. But when you go back to the basics, it's just about humanity. It's just about me and you. How do you feel? How do you feel in our society?
It's amazing how much we can overcomplicate when you put it like that, you know, about humanity and intersectionality just simply being all of those incredible elements that just make us human beings. And also a very interesting point in that, you know, working from the inclusion space first and then the diversity, you know, being a byproduct of that, whereas how many of organizations or how many of us have been thinking about these topics and going from the reverse. And, you know, even the name of this event being diversity and inclusion. What if we were to shift the perspective on it? What perhaps change could we begin to start making or unfolding? So we touched on it a little bit there around, you know, hearing diversity and inclusion, obviously very topical at the moment. How do we not become the people who just jump on the bandwagon and continue that actually, rather than just paying lip service to these things, to actually continue that conversation once, you know, the movements start to die down? How do we start to instigate real change? And what are some steps that we can maybe start to do now, start to do in our own communities? How do we, you know, what can we be reading, watching, educating ourselves, but then taking that to go and act, which I know, Kathy, you mentioned as being really the missing link.
I think where to start is to listen to diverse voices from different parts of the community. That's why we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen. And I think at the moment the problem is that people spend too much time and energy trying to defend themselves, to say, I'm not ableist, I'm not racist, I'm not this, I'm not that. When actually, just slow down, stop those voices in your head and listen to someone, because their experiences are their own experiences. It's how they feel. And it's basically rude to just discount someone's experiences. We've all come from different parts of the world. Our cultural heritage is different. So your experience is completely different to mine. So so I would my suggestion would be to listen. It's just as simple as that, and respecting each other.
Love that idea of the 2 ears and the 1 mouth. It's amazing how quickly we can forget that. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else would like to touch on this topic?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. When I think of diversity and inclusion, I think there's, you know, for example, at a personal level, I know that I value diverse groups of people because I like learning from different people. For example, one of my closest friends, Kate, I don't know if she's still there, but yeah, so I wouldn't trade our friendship with anyone who's got the same cultural background as me, because, you know, there's something about meeting someone from a different upbringing and the value add is something that you just can't get anywhere. And at a community level, I agree with Lillian about the fact that it is about community. We need to be able to really be safe, and I think safety it's not just about, you know, the comfort of home or surrounding, but it's about knowing that, you know, when you're out in the community, nothing harmful is going to happen to you. You know, you are respected, your humanity is valued, and people don't see you as the other because of that fact, you know, the humanity aspect of diversity. We all come, even in one home, people are born differently. Like no one, even though you share similar DNA, you still have your own identity, your own likes and dislikes. So the diversity, I just don't really think it should be a thing that is separate from our being as people. And at a business level, I think research indicates it's good for business. So we're not taking away from business, we're adding so much value. So it's really, I find it bizarre that it should be a topic of discussion as a thing that is needed when really it is in fact needed. Like it's not a matter of do we need diversity, do we need people to feel inclusive. That's not even it. Because it's like the way we breathe, right? We're social beings. Like without you and me, forget it, you can't be without me. Like that's the reality, you know. We're able to use Zoom because someone else thought of Zoom. So you know, it's about like I'm always struck by the amount of hate I see in some people, because I think to hate is actually, it takes a lot of energy. And I'm like, if you use that hate for good, imagine how much creativity, how much it would really push the humanity forward. Because you know, it takes a lot of energy to hate. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. We, you know, in terms of that topic of hate and just that discomfort, also in terms of meeting that. Lisa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, you know, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because we all hear things or see things that we don't necessarily agree with, or we just maybe brush under the rug. How, in your opinion, do you feel like we call out bad action or behaviour maybe that we don't agree with in others, and be that voice for change, you know, whether that's our own family or whether that's strangers or friends?
Sure. I've heard a lot of different people speak on this, so I'll add a few of those thoughts that I agreed with along the way. There's lots of ways to go about it, and you know, case by case. Obviously, we've all got that dodgy uncle who perhaps says something that just shouldn't ever be repeated again, unfortunately. Having a conversation with a relative who maybe is just a bit daft in that area is very different to doing something like calling out a brand who's acting inappropriately, or their marketing or advertising is derogatory in some way. I listened, I don't know if anyone else here listens to Mia Freeman's No Filter, but it was an interesting podcast interview just on Monday about collectivism, and this idea that social media has been such a wonderful thing for advocates like myself to get our message out there and spread awareness. But in so many other ways, from another perspective, people generally, and not saying anyone here is doing that, just get a bit lazy and think, great, if I share it on Facebook or hit like on Instagram, then I've done my bit. There's nothing more to do. So getting angry and tweeting about it and just sticking a hashtag and thinking that's all you have to do is definitely not enough. There's ways to go about it, and again, this is a case by case scenario. So in some instances, for example, I've seen influencers who I know who have perhaps used some maybe language or used the word special when it really wasn't appropriate to discuss someone with disabilities. And so instead of calling them out on social media and having a big rant about how they're ableist, and I've just quietly slid into their DMs and gone, hey, just thought you might want to know. Publicly shaming people, in my personal opinion, isn't going to help the situation. It makes me look like a complete bitch. And I also think back to, as I mentioned before, I spent 24 years without a disability. I didn't know a lot about this world. I said the really stupid things unintentionally. My heart was in the right place, and I said dumb stuff and I asked dumb questions. I didn't mean to at all. And so I think back to that girl and think, how would she like to have been spoken to and being publicly shamed on a social media platform or something like that? which unfortunately we see a lot of, is certainly, in my opinion, not the best way to go about it.
Yeah, that's some really interesting topics to think about there, especially that idea of collectivism. You know, it's not even just that sense of paying lip service or talking the talk, it's the clicking the click as well these days, which also needs to be looked at and to really consider, because like you said, if you know it's the naming and shaming and calling it out, you're really feeding into that kind of fear, or that, you know, almost to the point of hatred culture, which is exactly the thing that we're trying to mitigate.
The hatred, I can't speak for other minority groups, but in the disability sector, there's the disability silo, and we all sit in the silo and we all talk amongst ourselves and bitch and moan amongst ourselves. And that was what I noticed when I first entered the silo, so to speak. I wasn't entirely happy with the way that was going about. I thought, we're not sharing these really important messages and really important conversations. The non-disabled community need to know about this and understand this in a way that's more easily consumed by them. So I'm trying to bridge that gap just a little bit, and so are other people, of course, but trying to just get out of that silo and only be communicating with like-minded people and spread the word amongst perhaps some of the change makers in the non-disabled community.
And I guess, as Lizzie said, using that energy and, you know, to the best of your ability, rather than using it against, you know, for fear or hate. Now, I know I'm very conscious of time, and I know we could talk all night about this topic. I feel like we're only just getting started. So what I would love maybe is if anyone did have any burning questions while I ask this next, to maybe pop it in the chat. But what I wanted to talk to you guys and just throw it out there in terms of how far away do you guys think we are from an inclusive Australia? Do you think that, you know, we will ever see it in our lifetime? How do we get there? But actually, even what gives you hope right now?
I think it will take quite a while, but I don't think that should kind of prevent us from doing everyday little actions to kind of get there. I think just having a think about our own circle of influence, like the people that we work with, the people that we do business with, our children. So we, you know, have a look at some of the things that we can control. So we can control who we do business with, right? And then just considering, okay, so do their values align with our values? With our children, just teaching them earlier on about what's acceptable behavior and what's not. And so it's just those little everyday actions that we can do, which does contribute towards a more inclusive world. There is a lot to be done, but I think the more we can do this together as a community, the more we'll see it. So I think, you know, maybe we need like the Kardashians or something like that to do something like that, you know, because people buy into people, right? People are easily influenced by other people. They don't care about stats and all that stuff. They care about, you know, if they see someone demonstrating something or doing a certain behavior, they will follow it. So that's just my thoughts.
Thanks, Kathy. And I know Shaku mentioned in the chat there that by leading with example with our kids, you know, it's not complicated. Kids weren't born with that discrimination in their hearts, so we need to keep reinforcing that idea of acceptance. So thank you, Shaku, for also sharing that. Lizzie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, look, I honestly believe at the end of the day, you know, when you are a responsible citizen, you will always do the right thing. And being a responsible citizen, it's not about, you know, not breaking the law, but it's about recognizing the value in others. And if I think at a personal level, you demonstrate that at workplace, you challenge, call out, you know, behaviors that aren't right, it comes with a set of responsibility, you know, that desire to speak out against something. It's not anyone can do that, but if we encourage that behavior in people, you know, we really make it really a necessary thing. You know, we're not just certain people. You know, I feel like, you know, one shouldn't have to be to recognize themselves as some sort of warrior to call out a bad behavior. I think if you know that behavior impacts all of us, then it should be a personal, really a personal calling to want to really stop that from continuing. And I think if we start at personal level, and you know, and then community level, I feel that change is possible. I am very optimistic, and I really believe that inevitably sort of overcomes the bad. You know, and I've seen it with poverty. I came from a refugee background, and here I am building a life for myself. I think someone believed in me, and now I have that responsibility, you know, to continue to encourage others to pursue these goals. If we wait for someone else to open the doors for us, I don't think it's possible. You know, I've always, you know, I really like that quote about, you know, someone made a quote about bringing your own chair. You know, you know, it's about that responsibility. And you know, you sit in that table if you weren't invited. Bring your own table, sit there. If they call the cops on you, you can, you know, later. But it's really important to take a responsible approach to this, knowing that what you're doing is going to inspire someone else.
It's that responsibility to be a decent human being.
Yeah,
Really.
That's right. And I think when you, I love that comment that you made, Lizzie, about responsibility, because it just comes down to ownership. How do you look at the world? What's your ownership? How do you perceive your ownership? What's your locus of control? I think that's really powerful. And you hear people saying, I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. I was silent because I didn't know, or that was not my responsibility. It was HR's responsibility. It was a government's responsibility. It was Kathy's, Lisa's responsibility. It wasn't mine. It's not my issue. It's their issue. It's the Black Lives Matter issue. It's our issue. It's all our issue. And that ownership is really important. And sometimes we don't know what to do. I mean, there's so many times where I am blind, where there's unconscious bias, and I have no idea what to do. And there are times where I don't even think about certain things that I should be or I need to. And the thing that helps me the most is obviously the work that I do, but curiosity, just asking questions. You don't have to have all the answers. And sometimes answers are not even on the internet. That simple connection with another person and sharing storytelling is really powerful. It's something that is embedded in my culture. That is where you learn about somebody. That's when you gain actionable insights. That's when you identify opportunities to support the other person, to be an ally, to walk alongside people, to affect change. So I think the storytelling is so important, but it requires you owning the issue, owning the matter, and then taking action. Taking action and storytelling is a great place to start.
Yes. And I think, you know, even just thinking about this evening and how impactful that has been, just to hear each of your 4 stories, so incredibly different and incredibly powerful all in their own individual ways. And, you know, I can even see comments here from Laurie who says, thanks to everyone for sharing your stories and experiences. The honesty, openness has been felt. And I know I speak from behalf of myself and all of the other members of this community, because that idea of having the 2 ears and the 1 mouth and listening to the stories and the innate humanness that's in us all, not the labels, you know, that sense of all of those individual drops of gold that make us who we are, that when we fully listen to that, that's where we start to understand, and that's where we can start to make the change, because it's without that we, you know, we are blind. We are blind. And thank you again for sharing all of that. I know for me it's been super powerful, and I've really appreciated your openness and your honesty and taking the time. I am also very aware of time, as I mentioned, and would love, I feel, I don't know about you guys, but I feel we could go on another 3 hours and maybe pour another glass of wine and we could continue on. But again, a huge, huge heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you, to you, Lillian, to Lisa, to Kathy, to Lizzie. I guess, was there any final messages that you might like to share before we all head off into the rest of our day or evening, wherever we are in the world?
I would just like to quickly thank everyone. I was really inspired by all the stories. Lisa, Kathy, Lillian, I mean, it's a pleasure to sit with on a panel with such incredible women, honestly, like amazing work. And I'll be stalking all of you and continue to be inspired by your work. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank the organizers for this event. We've talked about storytelling being a powerful medium to really share experiences and understand somebody else's experience, and experiences that will inspire change. So I'm grateful for the organizers. I'm grateful for everyone that has participated in this discussion. And my hope is that you've taken at least one thing that will allow you to take the next step. And if we all take next steps, the collective action is where the change will happen. So I'm wishing you all the best.
I've heard the quote mentioned this year, which has just stood by me, and all sorts of experiences in my life, and it's a little often equals a lot. And I think that's an incredibly powerful thing to remember. A little often equals a lot, and to make big change. Kathy, Lisa, any final comments? I know we're getting a lot of comments in the chat section about resources or, things to go on and look towards after this conversation ends to keep that instigation of change going. So perhaps we might chat to you guys a little bit later and share with the community and in our email tomorrow, if that's okay with you guys. Sure. And so Kathy and Lisa, is there any final comments that you might like to share?
I'd just like to thank everyone for showing up as well. Diversity inclusion is a sexy and not sexy topic, so it does take a lot of, I guess, courage or, to even listen to these stories. So I'm sure there are some other people who'd rather watch Netflix or something like that. But so thank you for showing up, because it just shows that you want to see change in this world. So thank you.
I'll second that. Big thank you. And my only bit of advice to sum everything up would be to listen, as Kathy was saying, listen to diverse voices, but not in mainstream television. So follow a few random disability bloggers or something like that, because just like to non-disabled people, disabled people are not alike. So don't assume that what you see on Channel 9 or 10 as either inspiration porn or a Paralympian, that is what all disabled people are like. So absolutely get out there and find us online.
That idea of questioning, curiosity and discernment, I think, are really, really important. So again, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you to each and every one of you. See you, we hear you, and it has been an honour to have you with us for this evening. To all of you guys who have been joining and so patient as we have run over time, thank you. A big thank you to being here, and to echo the speakers. Just to have you guys here is just such a demonstration and a comfort to know that there are so many people that are really committed to making positive change, which is pretty hopeful, especially in times like this that we're in at the moment. So stay tuned. We'll have an email that will go out tomorrow with each of our panelists' details, where you can hear more, where you can connect with them. We have lots of exciting things to come, including our next event, which will be Real Talk on Grief, next September, another extremely important topic. So please help spread the word. We do have that impact goal of 5 million conversations, so we only get there with you guys, and to continue to open and be real and honest.